Hello viewers, this is actually not a new upload. This is the live stream, the Patreon live stream that I did back in March last month. And unfortunately I deleted it. I deleted the original live stream accidentally via Patreon, and because it was a live stream I didn't have it backed up, so I thought it was lost for all time. And then just in the last couple of days I learned that one of my subscribers is a data hoarder. That his words, not mine. And he apparently backed it up before it disappeared. So I'm able to re-upload it to my channel. So it's not a new video, but just for the sake of completeness, I thought I would re-upload it with these introductory comments, just so that you are prepared in case you've already seen it and you're wondering why you're seeing it again. So enjoy. Hello. Well, it's telling me I am live, so I must be live, although I never quite trust these live streams. It's still quite a new thing for me, but I'm doing my best to adapt to the 21st century. But here it is, the third, in fact, monthly Patreon live stream. This is for patrons that are on the Greece level. Just a reward really for their support of the channel. In fact, the support of all the patrons is just fantastic. I just figured a few months back that I should really start doing something to say thank you for this. So those that are on the Greece level get to comment and ask questions in these live streams. And yeah, we'll see what they have to say. I actually have some questions to get started with, because that's what's been given to me on the Patreon page. So if I go to the comments for this video, I'll get cracking. Faith McGinn, one of my patrons, says, does anyone know the name of the psychological phenomenon where the more you invest in thing or cause, the less likely you are to give it up, even with diminishing returns? I've thought a lot about how this applied to the 1975 shenanigans and others. Jehovah's Witnesses are so invested they absolutely can't let go, even as their life gets worse. Faith, I don't know what the name is, what the terminology would be to describe what you're describing, but it's obviously a factor, isn't it? That the more you invest in something, the more decades of your life are tied up in promoting something and in believing something, the less likely you are to admit that you were wrong, because there comes a point where you just keep it's like you know you're losing, and then you just keep playing high stakes poker to try and get back what you've lost, and all that happens is you just keep digging a bigger and bigger hole. So it's very sad, isn't it, that's the effect that cults have on people. But yes, it's very worthwhile pointing out. Albert Mickelson has a number of comments which I'm going to try and do justice to. In fact, I'm going to take his comments one by one and try and keep tabs on the live chat. So if you guys have live chat questions, I'm going to do my very best, or comments even, I'm going to do my very best to answer those. Oh, and I see a few coming through. Hi Lloyd, awesome shirt. Thank you very much, Nikki. This is in fact one of my favourite t-shirts. I actually got this in June during my trip to America, on one of my very few days off during the tour of America. We went to Disneyland as a family, and I got two Star Wars t-shirts. I got this one and the one that says the force is strong in my family. I got that one as well. So yes, I'm quite pleased with this t-shirt. So Albert says, I don't know how familiar you are with the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's the finding that the less educated someone is on a specific subject or in a particular field, the more qualified and capable they believe themselves to be. This, in my opinion, applies to most Jehovah's Witnesses, but I think elders especially seem to greatly overestimate their abilities. and it seems like it gets more severe as you climb the ladder. I'm not intimately familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect, but I have heard of it, and I know as much as you've described, and it does certainly look that way when you look at the way things operate in the Jehovah's Witnesses, that there is just this assumption that when you become an elder, and having been an elder I can say this firsthand, there's this assumption that although part of you is thinking, oh, I'm not worthy of this, I've got to kind of step up to the plate at this point. At the same time, you're kind of thinking, well, I'm here on merit. I know pretty much everything that there is to know, and nothing can surprise me. And it's only when you get out of the religion that you realise that you knew nothing. And one of the points I make in my book is that when you do research as an ex-Jehovah's Witness, it isn't difficult to get to a stage where you know more than elders know about the religion. So yes, it is quite astonishing how you have that phenomenon in society where people just assume they know more than they actually know, or are capable of doing more than they can do. I always try, if possible, I try where possible not to overestimate my abilities, because then that stops you from becoming complacent. So we'll go to the live chat, and I see that there is a respectable number of comments and questions coming through. Canal de Urim says, "Hi Lloyd, I would like to ask you a difficult question." Oh dear. How do you think you would react if your daughter decided to become a Jehovah's Witness? That's actually a question I have been asked before. I don't know whether it's difficult. It's a difficult scenario to imagine because the way I've answered it in the past is to say there's as much chance of her joining ISIS as there is of her becoming a Jehovah's Witness. In fact, there's more chance of her joining ISIS because she's growing up, or we will make sure that she knows very well the effects that the religion has had on our family. But you know, you can never say never. So it's always possible. There reaches a stage where they're adults and they have to make their own decisions. So if she decided to become a Jehovah's Witness, that's unfortunately something that we would have to just live with, or do our best to live with, even if we would be extremely hurt and disappointed. But I just can't see it happening because, yeah, she's going to be very, very well briefed on why that would not be a wise thing to do. But again, you can't be complacent with these things. Sherry D'Souza says, "Good morning, everyone." So yes, it's actually evening here, but isn't it strange how it works with the times? I'm doing my very best to try and do these videos. It just so happens that 9 o'clock in Croatian time is a good time for me to do videos because it's just after Jessica's gone to bed and I've got a very booming voice. So wherever I am in the house, I'm going to stop her from sleeping, basically, if she's just nodding off. But she's hopefully, I think, just nodded off just a few minutes ago. So I'm kind of in here trying to not boom too much. Canal de Urim has another question. How do you think you would respond if the governing body invites you in to discuss some kind of reform on the religion of Jehovah's Witnesses? That's actually a very interesting question because I don't mind saying this. I've written to them, actually, or I've written to Watchtower. I got an address. I don't think anyone knows this apart from Deanna. But I just wrote to them. I just think it's always good to try and find ways of having a civil discourse, even when you have two sides that are diametrically opposed to each other. It's always good to get a dialogue going, and if I have to be the first one to suggest it, then I'm happy to. But I actually sent an email to one of the governing body helpers whose email address I got, and made the offer for her to sit down and talk about, I guess you could say it was reform. I just think it's tragic that a lot of the most cult-like qualities of Jehovah's Witnesses could very, very easily be gotten rid of, so that what you're left with is actually quite a fairly benign group, and a group that isn't impacting on people's lives quite so much, and is actually more respectable. And because it's more respectable, it's not getting the negative publicity, or at least there's not as much negative publicity. So it's in Watchtower's interests, in other words, to stop being such an awful cult. And I'd be happy to spell out, if given the opportunity, exactly how that is so in a civilised conversation. But I haven't heard back yet. But the offer is there, Watchtower. If you are watching by any chance, the offer is always there to have a nice civilised conversation. I better get back to one of Albert's other questions. Actually, are there any other? Yeah. So it's I've already answered Faith's question. Albert has a second question. Quite some time ago you made a video regarding shunning and the organisation continually denying it when asked by news outlets about it. Yes, that was a video where I said that if Watchtower is so proud of its shunning policy to the point where it describes it as being a command of Jehovah, then why does it keep denying that it has that policy, or it tries to water down the policy when it's describing it in front of journalists? Albert says, do you plan on revisiting that subject now that new denials have come out? I'm thinking specifically of some of the testimony at the Australian Royal Commission and just recently from the Watchtower lawyer in Canada. Albert refers, of course, to the Canadian Supreme Court, in which there was a case where a disfellowshipped witness was suing Watchtower for having his livelihood impacted by shunning. And in making their defence, a Watchtower lawyer said in the Supreme Court, he basically misrepresented entirely what shunning is all about, and said that it's something to do with it only being about speaking on spiritual terms or something like that. It was a complete and utter fabrication of what shunning is or means. So yes, it would be worthwhile revisiting that line of argumentation at some point. I was actually planning at one stage doing like a feature-length film just about shunning. So I did one about child abuse, and my plan was to do one about shunning, and for various reasons that kind of fell by the wayside. But I would be open to picking up where I left off on that. Back to the live stream, where there's lots of questions coming through. Okay, I've got another one from Canal de Urim. Do you have a superior degree? Do you have any educational plans for yourself? I don't have any firm educational plans. I know that if part of the problem is geographically, it would be problematic for me to go and do a degree or enroll myself in college or university because I'm in Croatia, and my Croatian is terrible. So, but having said that, I do plan, or we plan, on moving to the UK or an English-speaking country at some point. So never say never. And if I can, improve my knowledge by going through higher education, even if it's when I'm long in the tooth and old and obsolete, I'll definitely pursue that opportunity if I can. Canal also asks, I would like to recommend a video about tribal psychology and motivated reasoning and how it relates to Jehovah's Witnesses and other cults. That sounds familiar, that question. Let me just quickly check. I thought that was one of the other questions that Albert had. I'm probably getting confused. Yes, tribal psychology is very much a factor. in lots of areas of life, not just cults. And whenever I see it, I really do struggle to understand how people can allow themselves to stoop to that kind of thinking where, oh, my team's better than your team, or my country's better than your country, or my religion's better than your religion. And it's definitely prevalent in cults. So the trouble is, of course, that I'm not an expert on psychology, so I can only give a fairly limited perspective on things, but it's a good point that you raise. Sherry D'Souza says, we all respect the dignified manner your activism takes. Oh, thanks, Sherry. What suggestions can you share about how to remain dignified despite being rightly annoyed by the society? What suggestions? I guess the most important thing to do well, this is obviously just my perspective, but that's what I'm being asked to give, my perspective. I think that it's crucial that you remember that there is a distinction between Watchtower or the Jehovah's Witness leadership and Jehovah's Witnesses. And as long as you fully acknowledge that distinction and what it entails, in other words, that Jehovah's Witnesses aren't in full possession of their own minds, and therefore aren't really in a position to think critically or examine their beliefs critically, and certainly aren't in a position to contradict what their leaders say. I think once you fully accept that, that alone should inform the approach that you take when you're talking to people, because it's no longer about winning an argument. I think that's one of the easiest mistakes to make when you are doing videos or you're in some way engaging with witnesses, is to think that it's a point scoring, argument winning exercise. That's not the objective. I think the objective is more about kind of gradually, almost imperceptibly persuading them, even if it's a case of planting a seed so that they can kind of go away thinking, what was it he said? That was, I didn't have an answer for that. Which is kind of what I tried to do in the Disneyland video, and I'm hoping I get another opportunity to do that. And Sherry also asks, how is the new book coming along? I think I have had a related question. Let me see if I can find where the other question is about the book. I seem to be struggling to find the questions on the posts. Let me refresh the post. Well, while I'm doing that, the book's finished. The book is completely written. Everything that I could write for the book is written, and it's edited, and it looks beautiful. It's just not in print form yet. And the only other thing that's missing is that I need to do the index. And the index is the most tedious, or one of the most tedious parts of doing a book. When I did it for The Reluctant Apostate, which obviously is a much longer book, it took me ages to do it, and I hated it. And there was also complications with the page numbering, which meant that I had to kind of I had to add one to all of the page numbers or something like that. So I'm at the stage now where I'm practically ready to press the button. I just need to do like a day's work to get the index finished, and then it's ready to print. But it's not as simple as just then putting it on Amazon, which I would in theory be able to do. I then need to go to the UK, print out a bunch of copies, send those to the Indiegogo backers, wait for 3 weeks, and then it can go on Amazon. But that's basically where the book is up to. I'm now going to see if I can find, without being too you must forgive me. I had a question Ah, here we are, Veronica. I found some questions that had eluded me. Veronica Duncan says, "Hey Lloyd, congratulations on finishing up your new book. Can you give us a rough idea of the kind of work and man hours that were involved with the research, writing, editing, reviewing and publishing of this book? And how many people were involved? I don't think anyone who hasn't written a book can fully understand the kind of agony an author goes through. And I think if any of us decides to write an XJW book, we should be fairly warned of what we're getting into." Thank you, Veronica. That's an excellent question. Okay, with the first book is always the hardest, I guess I should say. And bear in mind that I don't really know about going through a traditional publisher. I only know about self-publishing because both of my books are or will be self-published. And the first book, The Reluctant Apostate, was obviously it had taken me many years to write it. And then for the when I was trying to get it over the line, there was like a 5-month intensive kind of push to get it finished, and that was crazy, the amount of work that was involved there, because it was writing, it was researching, it was editing, it was checking proofs, it was sorting out who would be doing what, it was finding the right people for each job, and it was a nightmare. But the second book, How to Escape from Jehovah's Witnesses, well, first of all, it's much shorter. So whereas The Reluctant Apostate's 200,000 words, How to Escape from Jehovah's Witnesses is at the moment, I think, 35,000 words. So it's not even a quarter of the thickness of The Reluctant Apostate. So straight away, it was an easier book to write. And I think I wrote it in, was it 3 months? I think I wrote it in about 3 months. I can't remember the exact date when I started writing and when I finished writing. But and there were kind of periods of there were delays in between, but it was a much easier book to write because there was less research involved, because I was obviously just writing more from experience. And I mean, there was some research, but nowhere near as much as when you're writing about Charles Taze Russell and Joseph Franklin Rutherford and blood transfusions and that kind of thing. So I guess, in answer to your question, it really depends on what kind of book you're writing. But again, the second book is always going to be easier. A lot will depend on how thick the book is. A lot will depend on how much research is required. And a lot will depend on who you're working with. And in my own case, I'm very lucky to be working with just some fantastic people. I mean, for example, Arthur Weber, who does the design of the pages, he's just a genius. And I can just send him the manuscript and he will just make it look fantastic. And I'm always delighted when he sends the PDF and I get to see my words in this beautiful kind of paragraph layout with the footnote at the bottom. It looks brilliant. So yeah, I hope that kind of answers your question. But there's a lot to it, but you just have to muddle through it. A lot depends on how passionate you are about the project. If you really want to do it, nothing will stop you and you're going to get it done. And it really isn't rocket science. Nicole Kaisier says, "Hi Lloyd, I've noticed that in the witness religion there are many people with mental health issues. Do you think that being raised in this group causes people to have mental health issues? Or is it that people with mental health issues are more attracted to the witnesses over other religions for some reason? I personally think that both occur. I'm just interested to hear what you think about the matter." I would probably agree with you that it's not a case of one or the other necessarily. I think that the psychological issues that are raised by being in any cult are not going to be beneficial for your mental health. So the longer you're in a cult, like Jehovah's Witnesses, without being a mental health expert, I should say, I'm not by any stretch an authority on these matters, but I can see the longer you're in it, the more issues you get. But one thing that I actually talk briefly about in my book is the fact that in Jehovah's Witnesses you have compulsory friendship. And what that means is that you could be an extremely antisocial, awkward, eccentric person, and if you are approached by Jehovah's Witnesses, well, fantastic, here is this community of people who have to be my friend. They absolutely have to be my friend. There's no excuses, because they have to have agape love for everyone who is a Jehovah's Witness. And it felt like, or it doesn't feel like, it is in fact the case that in all 3 congregations that I have been in as a Jehovah's Witness, it felt as though there was like a group of these kind of socially challenged individuals who almost kind of huddled together, because even though you had compulsory friendship, it was still difficult for them to make friends. But yeah, I think that to a degree it also attracts people who already have issues to begin with. It's a great observation, by the way. I'd better go back to the live chat, because I've noticed some things. Canal de Urim and Sherry de Souza are furiously coming up with questions, which is fantastic. Let's see. Canal de Urim says, I was planning translate some of your videos to Brazilian Portuguese. Do you mind if I download your videos, add the subtitles, and then upload on my channel, citing your channel? I never have a problem with people translating my videos. All I would say that is, if you are going to do subtitles, it's probably going to be easier and it's probably going to get more views if, rather than putting it on a new channel, you just send me the, what's it called now? I think it's called an SRT file. And if you send me the subtitles as an SRT format file, I can just very quickly go into the back end of the video. And then what that means is that if you're watching the video in a Portuguese speaking country, it should automatically show the subtitles, or at the very least you'll be able to select them. But yeah, I'm always appreciative of people who help to translate my materials, and there's already a team of Portuguese and other people who speak other languages working on translating The Reluctant Apostate, which is a mammoth task. And I actually think that the Escape book will be translated into well, I know for a fact that it will be translated into non-English languages before the first translation of The Reluctant Apostate is ready. It's just the way it is, unfortunately. Sherry de Souza says, we would like to see your books in lots of public libraries. Is there a way we can assist in getting this done? That's a great question. I've kind of broached this on one of my videos. Someone said that, you know, it would be good to kind of approach libraries and ask them to order The Reluctant Apostate, and I have no objections. In fact, I appreciate people doing this, because it's nice for me to think that there is a way of reading The Reluctant Apostate without having to pay for it, especially if you are a physically in, mentally out Jehovah's Witness. I love the idea of just being able to go to your library and there it is on the bookshelf, and you can just sneak it off the bookshelf while no one's looking and disappear into a corner of the library, maybe hide it behind another book and read it. So I am thrilled at anyone who takes the time and trouble to go to their local library and say, could you please order this? Because I think someone sent me a photo once of the Reluctant Apostate with, you know, the library stickers on it, and I was thrilled. I was really, really thrilled because, you know, more than anything, it's an educational resource. It's something that I want to, that I hope will instruct people about the religion. So I delight at it being in libraries, and I don't know what all the different systems are in different countries, but I assume it's fairly straightforward to do what you've suggested and just ask about having the Reluctant Apostate ordered if it's not already there. Canal says, became an atheist has diminished a lot. The strong negative sentiment, I assume you mean becoming an atheist, has diminished a lot the strong negative sentiment about the religion of the Jehovah's Witnesses once I realised that they are wrong just like any other religion. That happened with you too. I guess so. I guess that when you are religious, I didn't just kind of stop believing in Jehovah's Witnesses and wake up and I was an atheist. I did go through like a transitional phase where I considered myself a Christian, albeit a skeptical Christian. And then I started identifying as an agnostic. And then I came to the conclusion that, you know, I can be an agnostic and an atheist. And in fact, I had been an atheist all along, really. But yeah, I guess that when you wake up from Jehovah's Witnesses and you are still religious, let's say you are fundamentalist Christian, apart from objecting to the cult-like traits of Jehovah's Witnesses from a purely human perspective, you're also going to have a whole bunch of ideological reasons to be very angry at Jehovah's Witnesses, because you're going to think, well, this is a satanic conspiracy, and here's Satan using this cult to draw people away. And I've noticed that quite often religious XJWs tend to put more truck into the more dubious arguments, such as subliminal imagery and connections with the Freemasons and the occult and what have you. And yeah, I can see why that would be if you're still of a religious persuasion. But when you get rid of religion completely and rely purely on, you know, logical, critical thinking, you aren't so worried about whether there is a new world order being or a Illuminati or what have you. You're just happy to point out the harmful elements of the religion and let people draw their own conclusions. Cherie asks, how have things unfolded for your family since that local newspaper article came out? I guess I'm kind of limited with how much I can say about that, actually, because it's am I still online? I just saw a little circle of doom, so I don't know whether it's cut out. Okay, I'm limited with what I can say. All I can say is that it has had an impact, and the impact continues to be felt. I think you know what I mean when I say that. It's not the same now as it was before the newspaper article came out. But I know that neither myself nor Deanna regret doing it, even though it has had a massive fallout. We don't regret doing it for the reasons I expressed in my video, because again, I would be a hypocrite if I was only interested in helping English-speaking Jehovah's Witnesses and completely ignored Jehovah's Witnesses in the country in which I live. It would just be hypocritical and irresponsible of me to behave in that way. But without going into too much detail, I think it's safe to say that the newspaper article has had a massive... It's been a bit like a bombshell here in Croatia, because it's only a small country with only a relatively small population of Jehovah's Witnesses, and they're just completely unused to having negative media. So to have this newspaper article that's even talking about things like Beth Sarim and the Royal Commission, and it's just mentioning pretty much everything that you could mention is in that article. So to have that searchable on, you know, when you're a Croatian speaker for the first time, that's had quite a big impact. And it's had an impact locally as well, because people are now who already sort of knew my family or knew of me, they also know about the article. So that's a bit weird to get used to as well, is that most of them sort of knew there might be a link with Jehovah's Witnesses but didn't really know too much about it. And now that not only do they know that I'm no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses, they also know that I'm a writer and have a big YouTube channel and blah, blah, blah. So it's been an interesting experience, shall we say. Running out of live chat comments, guys. Come on, if there's any others. I know there are, let's see, there are 8 watching. There are actually 60 eligible to join us, but for whatever reason, maybe I've picked an awful time to do it. I apologise. But if you have any other questions, please keep them coming in. Canal de Urim asks, do you consider moving to the USA? I do consider moving to the USA, although, what can I say? I feel as though there's like a gravitational pull to America, quite frankly, because of obviously Jehovah's Witnesses being based in America. And when I look at my channel statistics, my analytics information, the viewing figures from America eclipse every other country. It's just ridiculous, the difference in viewership. So in a way it would make absolute sense for me to live in America, but the logistics are obviously challenging to overcome, not least the immigration issues that I would need to deal with. I mean, because I'm not a Slovenian model, I think I would struggle. I don't know whether you read that thing about Melania Trump getting into America on an Einstein visa, which is just phenomenal. But yeah, I think it would be difficult for me to get the legal side of things sorted out, and I would obviously also want to make sure that we were doing the right thing for Jessica, and moving to like a neighborhood where she could acclimatize. So there's lots of things to consider, but I'm definitely open to moving to America. I especially would like to live somewhere. Well, that's the thing as well. Deanna loves Wales, so she'd probably want to live somewhere like Washington State, or somewhere like that. Whereas I love warm weather, so I'd want to be down in California or Florida or somewhere nice and warm, where there are less whales. So there would be arguments, I think. Okay, say 6 House 7. Any advice for someone planning on getting involved in activism and possibly starting their own YouTube channel? That's a very good question. What advice could I give you? I can only kind of state the obvious, which is, well, it's obvious to me at least, that some of the most compelling and most watched videos tend to be the ones where there is very little production, there's very little editing, although editing is important, but you often find that the really popular videos are the ones where it's just someone being completely heartfelt, completely sincere on camera. Those are in my view, the most compelling videos, and usually that comes in the form of someone telling their story for the first time. And yeah, I would definitely encourage as many people as possible to make those kind of videos. But in terms of everything else, I can only tell you that when I first started making videos, I kind of thought that I might do okay at it. But even to this day, I try not to take for granted my audience, and I try not to be boring, and I try not to be self-indulgent with people's time. So, for example, I wouldn't want to make people watch awkward moments where I'm forgetting a line or saying something in a stupid way or something comical is happening, because it's just not important. I value the time that people are investing in watching my videos, so for that reason, even though my videos tend to be quite long, I try to make sure that it's edited so that people are only watching the relevant stuff. And when I'm editing the longer rebuttals, I'll quite often end up getting rid of a whole bunch of stuff. You know, the rebuttal that you see for JW Broadcasting, let's see, you're probably watching 70% of what was filmed. And the remaining 30% is me screwing up and having to say things over and over again, or me giving other arguments where when I later edit it, I think, well, you've kind of got a point there, but it's just not important. That there are far more interesting things to be talking about, which you are talking about, and by including that argument, you're actually watering it down a little bit, and you're starting to look nitpicky at this point. So my advice would be to try not to be too self-indulgent, try not to be too boring, never take your audience for granted, and just do your very best and be yourself. Be yourself, be genuine, be sincere, and yeah, and the views will come. Build it and they will come, as they said in the Kevin Costner film, I believe. Canalda Urim says, can we assume that a negative growing in the numbers of Jehovah's Witnesses in the next years is due to your article? Oh, you mean in Croatia? I have to assume you mean Croatia. I don't know. I try not to lay claim to things that I can't prove. So, I mean, Croatia isn't great for growth anyway. They've had negative growth over the last couple of years, I believe, or maybe even longer than that. So I can't see the article helping, but I wouldn't be quick to say, well, this is because of my article. So yeah. Let's see. Canal also asks, what's your favourite TV shows? TV shows. I don't watch a great deal of television. The thing that I'm watching most at the moment is, well, it's just finished, but the first season of Star Trek, I was watching all of that as soon as it came out. It's weird this, because you would think that I would have watched Game of Thrones. I've not watched Game of Thrones yet, and Deanna and I are actually looking at getting a subscription to HBO so that I can watch Game of Thrones from the beginning, so that when it comes to the next season, whenever that is, I'm fully briefed on what the whole damn thing's about. So some of the obvious things I haven't watched, and I think mainly because, especially if it's got kind of violence and gore and people doing unpleasant things to each other, apart from any kind of moral reasons, I just struggle to... That kind of thing has a habit of staying with me. But then recently Deanna has noticed that I seem to have a stronger stomach for that kind of thing. So recently I watched all of the episodes of Frontier. I don't know whether you know that. That's on Netflix. And Deanna said, well, if you can watch Frontier, you can definitely watch Game of Thrones. So yes, that's kind of the fictional side of things I'm a little bit slow on. I do enjoy as well Top Gear and Grand Tour. So that's I enjoy those episodes. And funnily enough, I'm not really into cars. I'm not like a massive, you know, nerd when it comes to different types of engines and what have you. I just enjoy that kind of programming. So Cherie de Souza says, move to Australia. We have warm weather and whales and sharks. Cherie, listen, never say never. And probably we need to visit Australia first, and then we can kind of progress the conversation. But yeah, I actually, Deanna would probably bite your hand off at that suggestion. But yeah, never say never. Veronica Duncan says, move to the USA. It's you might want to stay in Croatia. Well, frankly, I mean, in all seriousness, you do look at events recently, particularly the school shooting or the latest school shooting, and it does make you think, gosh, you know, because Deanna and I visited America the time before. Well, obviously we visited in June last year, but before that we visited in 2013. And it was our first time on the West Coast. And I remember both of us being a bit bewildered by we were in San Diego, and it felt very kind of intimidating because obviously I'm from Britain, where everything's fairly uneventful and, you know, how can I put it, a lot more relaxed, I think. And similar in Croatia, and there we were in San Diego with these really loud, very aggressive sirens of police cars and massive roads, and everything seems bigger and more intimidating. But so it does scare us, in fact, a little bit, America, quite frankly. But I guess it's just like anything. Everywhere's got a slightly different feel to it and a slightly different culture. And to begin with, it seems very strange and intimidating. But you just get used to it, don't you? It's just somewhere else to live. And people are essentially people wherever you go. Canal de Urim says, move to Brazil. We've started a competition now of where I should move. Move to Brazil, it's warm, and we can import some whales. Not quite sure it works that way. They do have the river dolphins, don't they, in the Amazon, and they're sort of whales. But I don't think, yeah, I don't think it quite works that way. Although I'm not an expert on whales and biology and that kind of thing. Veronica Duncan says, how do you go from having an idea for a video to the finished script? That's a good question. I can't seem to make that leap. Well, Veronica, not all of my videos have scripts, so I wouldn't even say it's 50-50 at the moment. At the moment, virtually everything I'm doing doesn't have a script. I did go through a phase, quite a long phase in fact, where almost everything had a script, and I was scripting the JW Broadcasting rebuttals, I was scripting the convention rebuttals, I was scripting more or less everything, and although it made things a little bit more precise and a little bit more polished, it also meant that the videos were taking me maybe 4 or 5 days, even longer in fact. Sometimes it would take a couple of weeks to make a convention rebuttal. Whereas if I just get in front of the camera and play the clip, talk, I can bash it out in like a day or 2 days max. So, but really what you're saying is, how do you go from having an idea for a video to the finished product? And it's just perseverance, really. It's just, I mean, in my own case, when I first started making videos, it was very cathartic and it was something that was kind of helping me process things. Whereas now, although there is an element of catharsis, it's also my job. So once I have an idea for a video, it's my job to turn it into the real thing. And so you basically need to know, have your motivation, or know where your motivation is coming from. But yeah, you just have to want to make it happen, and you'll do it. I'm sure you'll be able to do it if you just believe in yourself. Okay, Canal de Urim says, what do you think about the wise suggestion from Trump to arm the teachers? Oh, I take it you're being sarcastic about it being wise to arm teachers. Without wanting to go into that whole issue, I don't think more guns is the solution to the problems in America at the moment. Cherie D'Souza says, did you receive any feedback from the organisation after your visit to the new headquarters? I haven't received any feedback, actually, and I wouldn't expect to receive feedback. Having said that, I also don't expect it to be as easy to get into Warwick next time. I think it's going to be more difficult because I can't imagine them being oblivious to that video, because obviously they encourage witnesses to, you know, make a big deal of coming to Warwick, and inevitably there are going to be witnesses posting their videos to YouTube. And when those videos are being shown on YouTube, you can bet that in a lot of cases my video will be in the recommended videos. So it's going to find its way back to Watchtower if it hasn't done already. And I can't see them being happy about it, because obviously I'm not saying the things that they would have liked me to say. And they didn't know I was filming. That's another thing that probably, I don't know whether that's clear in the documentary, but even though I'm there with the camera, I wasn't kind of going around saying, I am filming for a YouTube video. I just had my camera there as though I was taking pictures, but really I was taking video. And the same really with the, we were using the Canon, and we were using, both Diana and I have Samsung S7, so we were filming on those as well. So we came out with so much footage. I think it was 9 gigabytes or something silly that we came out with. And then it was just the challenge of putting it all together. But again, I don't expect it to be as easy next time. And I'm sure if Watchtower didn't know about it before, I'm sure they'll know about it now. I'm just quickly looking, if I can, to see if there are any questions I've missed. All right, Albert's got another couple. Oh, there's the one from Greg as well. All right, I'll take the one from Greg. I'm not sure I've answered that. Greg Evans says, hi Lloyd, just wondered if you were aware of the July 15th, 2013 Watchtower Study Edition discussing the faithful and discreet slave. It basically says that Jesus has not yet returned to give his approval, yet they just presume he will. This means that according to their own teaching, everything since 1919 has not yet been approved by Jesus, i.e. shunning, disfellowshipping, ban on blood transfusions, etc. Greg, yes, I wrote about that article at the time. In fact, I had a copy of it leaked to me a number of weeks before the article became available, and it gave me the opportunity to write a big long JW survey article analysing the faithful and discreet slave teaching. And one of the things I picked up on was the fact that they were just assuming that they were going to get the approval. So yeah, it makes no sense at all. Albert Mickelson says, do you think it's possible that some of the people in the upper echelons are required to sign non-disclosure agreements about what happens at the top? I don't know about non-disclosure agreements, but I do know that when you are a Bethelite, you sign a form about being obedient, and it's a vow of poverty, and you're going to turn over your earnings and that kind of thing. And I forget the exact wording, but it wouldn't surprise me It wouldn't surprise me if there's some confidentiality clause in there as well, but no, I can't see how they could get by without having confidentiality, especially at that level. And Albert also says, I've spoken to many JW apologists online, and I'm astonished at how much some of them know. Some are readily willing to admit that the organisation's stance on child abuse is flawed, that the 1914-1919 teaching is false, that they go far beyond what the Bible says regarding shunning and judicial committees, as well as the fact that some of the teachings are likely wrong. In spite of all this, they're still willing to support the organisation. What do you have to say to people like that? Well, what I have to say to them is that they have one foot in, one foot out. They're stuck in this kind of netherworld between believing and not believing. And actually, that was one of my first experiences upon waking up from the witnesses, was with a friend who was in precisely that situation. And I started opening up to him about my issues and my doubts. And he said, oh, well, there's loads of us, Lloyd. You need to come and, we'll have a meeting and and I'll introduce you to my friends. We're all talking about it, kind of thing. I think that there is a significant movement within the Jehovah's Witness community of people who think in exactly that way. That yes, it's flawed. Yes, there are issues. Yes, it's abusive. But it's still Jehovah's organisation, and they're basically just still indoctrinated. There's just no other way of describing it. Their minds are still owned by a watchtower, and they can't conceive the idea that the whole thing is flawed and has no basis. There is no logical reason to assume that it's God's organisation. Let me just see if I'm up to date with my live chat. Kanalda Urim says, do you consider yourself a shy person? I don't know whether I'm extrovert or introvert. I have moments of being introvert. I'm not always good around people. But I'm also not shy either. So usually if there's a party or something happening, I'll be heard. You'll know where I am. But I don't think it's really firmly one or the other. I do have moments where I just don't like being around people, and I'd rather just be by myself. Veronica Duncan, and we're coming up to the hour mark now, so if you have any final questions, get them in now. But this is I'm closing up now. Veronica Duncan has 2 questions. Watchtower videos keep harping on younger ones to have an older, mature mentor and encourage them to have one-on-one alone time together to study, preach, etc. My husband has never been a witness and he was appalled by this. They are furnishing potential offenders with more opportunities and avenues to be alone with children. What are they thinking? Yeah, I can't think exactly of what videos you're referring to, but there are far too many opportunities within the Jehovah's Witness religion for opportunistic predators to have alone time with children. And for example, one thing that's quite common in congregations, and I've never been able to figure out why this is, because it should be the parents who have the responsibility to indoctrinate their children. But a number of times I was asked to assume the role of the parent effectively by going through a book. The Young People Ask book was one book that I was asked to study with a young lad in a congregation. And, you know, I could have been anyone, couldn't I? I could have been an opportunistic predator who got kicks out of some of the chapters. So yeah, there's way too many opportunities there. And I think this will be my last question from Nikki K. Actually, it's not a question. Nikki's just saying, exactly, instead of protecting children, they are making it even easier for predators. Agreed. We can agree on that. And that, I think, can be that, because we're now almost nicely, comfortably up on the hour mark. I do just want to take this opportunity, as I always do, to thank all of my Patreon backers for making this channel possible. It's just impossible that I would be able to put out the amount of material I'm putting out if it wasn't my job. So again, when I wake up on a Monday morning, it's not, oh, I've got to get to the office, or I've got to do this, I've got to do that. No, it's what's my next video. And especially with Patreon, one of the goals was that I need to be doing 10 videos per month. And that translates to, I think, a video every 2 or 3 days. So if 2 or 3 days go by, I'm already thinking, damn, I need to put another video up. Because, again, it's my job. It's no longer just this cathartic exercise where I'll put up a video when I feel like it. So it's because of Patreon that I'm able to treat it that way, and because of Patreon that the videos are going up with the frequency that you're seeing. So I really do want to thank all of my patrons for getting behind me and believing in me and being my employers. That's how I view it. So thank you so much. I hope that I've done some of these questions justice. They were fantastic questions and comments. So thank you very much for that. It won't be long, I'm sure, until we do the next monthly live stream. But for now, I hope you've enjoyed this video. And as always, thank you for watching. And now I need to find the off switch. Oh, thank you. We appreciate all your hard work. Thank you, Nikki. And I appreciate having you as patrons. And I found the off switch. Okay, bye.